In the Margins. I'm your host, Ralph Newell. Today's guest is Dr. Frank Burtnett, a man who has had so many titles and too many distinctions to name. But Frank, I always think of you as your time as the executive director of NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admission Counselors, your time at ACA, and of course, your time at Diverse as a consultant. And from that time, I truly miss our Monday mornings when we armchair quarterback all the football games, especially Penn State and the Washington Commanders as they're known now. So
yes,
welcome, Frank.
Thank you. Glad to be here. You know, it's a long time ago, but I started out in the classroom, 7th and 8th grade English and history. At 82 years of age, I'm still in the classroom. I'm teaching on the adjunct faculty at Marymount University. Clearly, I don't need to work, but teaching is just one of those things that when you get it in your system, I think I got it in my system, 60 years ago. Now I'm just doing it a little differently than I did back then.
So yeah, you definitely had the background for the book that you put out. So primarily, today we're going to talk about Dr. Burtnett's new book, Career Challenges, which examines the career development encounters that people experience across their work lifespan. So I like to discuss this, Frank, in maybe a couple of chunks. First, the examination of the career development process and some of the 8 phases you talk about that people must go through in order for to have career success and satisfaction to be achieved. And then we'll delve a little bit into the significant challenges that one must confront and resolve as they navigate this experience. So first of all, I want to ask, what was the impetus for doing this book?
I didn't know this at the beginning of my education career, but I think I learned it along the way, and it's more pronounced today than ever, is that we don't do enough life skills education. We got on this thing a few years ago about minimum competencies. You have to be able to do this. You have to have done this to get a high school diploma. You have to do this to get a college degree. You have to do this to get a certificate or a license to practice your craft. There's some things that are very, very simple and very, very basic that some kids and some young adults never get. I would like every kid every young man or woman, before they get out of their educational experience, to write a resume, to practice a job interview, to look for a job. We do it, but nobody guides us through the process. And there's an interesting thing. This is the 3rd edition of this book. The first 2 editions were called Career Errors, Steps and Missteps of the Career Development Process. And then I got to thinking about it. These aren't errors so much. And I approached it from a viewpoint of things that people do or don't do, right, or should do. So the 3rd edition, I took a completely different tack. I came at it from a different angle. And that angle was this: if you're going to reach career success and satisfaction, you need to know a whole lot more than you know now. Whatever school or college or workplace teaches you anything, you need to know more than that. And then I looked at it, and that starts with the process of what's the career development process. Mm-hmm. And I wove that into the first book, and then I treated it as things that people didn't do right or they didn't do at all. In this book, and it came along during COVID, and it came along as this technology that we live in today, the fact that we're doing a podcast, the fact that we watch all this stuff come through our iPhone or mm-hmm. through our television sets. I have a hard time keeping up with it all. And I'm pretty idle a lot of the time, except when I'm writing or doing research or those kinds of things. And I thought to myself, this isn't going away. COVID had probably more impact on, I call the 3 W's, work, the worker, and the workplace, than anything probably since the Great Depression 100 years ago. So all that said, the 3rd edition of this book is titled Career Challenges, Straight Talk about Achieving Success in a Post-COVID High Technology World of Work. And that's how the book came to be.
Listen to what you were talking about, the kids learning to do resumes and all that. Honestly, Frank, that kind of takes me back. I'm sure you remember when you were doing consulting work for us, and we did the research for ASHA, American
Yes.
Assistive Hearing Language. And I remember one of the things that came out of your research was, hey, we wanted to diversify the ranks and get, minorities into that field, that we had to start working with those kids as early as middle school. So, you talked about having the kids do resumes and all that kind of stuff. So as an educator, how do we reach kids early in life and get them going and prepared for this type of work? Because I remember thinking back to that ASHA research, and when you said, okay, middle school, I'm just like, kids aren't thinking about that. I mean, they're going to miss the boat. So,
Well, and you're right. They aren't thinking about it, but they're still having certain experiences.
Mm-hmm.
That man or woman who comes to the mailbox every day is one of the characters they see.
Mm-hmm.
He's the letter carrier. When they go out with mom or dad to the grocery store, they see a whole bunch of people, from the butcher to the cashier to all sorts of people. So the world is happening around them. If anything, in childhood and adolescence, they are more consumers of information, but they're also consumers of something else. And this is why the first stage of my process is called self-awareness. They're beginning to identify who they are, and going back to your point about when we were doing the research for Speech and Hearing Association, a lot of people of color were not seen in those occupations. And if you don't see the role models, you don't see yourself. And that's why in all occupations, you go through this, and I'll do this real fast because it's 8 things. I found that 8 things scare people. They'd rather see 2 or 3. But there's a period of self-awareness that happens in childhood. But guess what? It continues on. I'm becoming more knowledgeable about myself in my 80s, not more, at least equal, about who I am. We called it maturity in the younger years, and now we call it human growth and development in the more senior years. Once you've got a handle on who you are, and I don't want you to think of my 8 stages as a ladder. If anything, they're a lattice. You go up and down sometimes, and you go right and left sometimes. After self-awareness, there's this period of time called exploration. This is when teens get into it. And the worst question that we ask teens is this: what do you want to be when you grow up? Those 10 words, they demand an answer. A 14-year-old isn't ready to answer that question yet. Once we get through the what do you want to be, and people blend awareness and exploration, they begin to make some decisions. They begin to set some goals. Those are 3 and 4. Then we go through this period of time called knowledge acquisition. We used to think that all you had to do was learn something and go do it. That was the process. But there's a new word in 2023, and it's skill set. You have to take the knowledge and convert it to a skill set. Nobody taught you to do what you're doing right now when you were in school or when you were in college. Knowledge plus skill set plus experience equals competence. That's what the employer's looking for. He wants the best Ralph Newell he can get his hands on. That's how the process, where you actually go out and look for a job. I call it orientation, entry, and adjustment. You may find out that you like what you're doing, but you hate where you're doing it. You like where you're working, but your career's not right. Some people today, literally, what's the word they use in the renovation world? Let's do demo. Let's get out of this place. What did I get myself into, in other words? When our fathers and our grandfathers and our mothers and our grandmothers were doing this, they were stuck. They came out, an old friend, Ken Hoyt was his name. He and a gentleman by the name Ed Herr are my 2 sore mentors when it comes to career stuff. Both of them said this: if we don't understand the process and we make mistakes, just like that old proverb, we're bound to repeat those mistakes. So we go through this period of getting a job, and then we settle in. But guess what? Along came this thing called lifelong learning. No one who prepared 20, 40, 60 years ago is prepared for today's world of work. Technology screwed all that up. Technology sort of moved in and said, listen, if you don't learn the next thing, you're going to be an antique tomorrow.
Right.
And so this is what I call growth and mobility and maintenance. We grow in our jobs. We become more mobile in our jobs. What we also find out at this time is the reality of the workplace. There's discrimination. There's a reluctance to enjoy inclusion. It's against the law, but a lot of people still do it. It's subtle discrimination. And that's the reality of the workplace today. I think because of laws we've passed, the civil rights laws, the gender balance laws, women have gotten better at getting compensation, but they're by no means equal with men yet. We started these laws back in the 1980s. We're now 30, 40, 50 years along. I'm finding a very interesting thing right now. I'm not looking for a job, but I'm finding ageism in the workplace. I'm finding people of different ability. I don't like to use the word disability. I don't like to use the word handicapped. I like to talk about different abilities. People of different abilities can still contribute. And then the final thing, and this is the last stage of my career development process, is what I call winding down, adjusting, and exit. Some people cut the cord. Some people say, boom, I'm out of here. I'm going to get to watch. I'm going to go find the rocking chair on the back porch, or I'm going to play golf every Wednesday morning, whatever it is. And they just waiting to do that. Other people go different routes. Some people volunteer. Some people like, the one nice thing, the one good byproduct of COVID is it taught us that remote work works. And that's one of the things that seniors are trying to do right now. I don't want to go to that office place 5 days a week, 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. I'd rather work from home 2 days a week. I'd rather work half day. So with this thing called career development, it's not a point in time. And especially decision-making, Ralph, I always say that decision-making, I call it a stage, but it's a stage, it's got a whole lot of little events in it. It's like when you came to work today, you made multiple decisions because it was a traffic jam on that certain highway into your office. And we make decisions. I have a thing in the book called the 9 steps to decision-making. Well, one of them is understand your options. Another one is evaluate your options. And then there's one, I think it's around 5 or 6 on the chart. It says decide, decide. And then you get to this other place. And then I said, well, wait a minute, is it over? No, you might have to evaluate your decision. Did you do the right thing? So, it's all these things I would like as a life skill. I would like teachers. I would like college professors. I would like certainly counselors. And if there's a career center on a college campus, I want all those people to be the most talented they can be as facilitators. They all have different roles. They all have very, very different roles. The better they can be as facilitators. Now, I think my book, I got one whole chapter that is sort of like who can help you. My book is for a consumer. If that's what the world calls self-help, that's correct. But I also think that educators can use it, teachers, professors, if nothing else, to get the self-knowledge. Right. And then I think the other thing which I think is important in this whole process is that there are going to be those people. My book should be in libraries. I wrote 2 books before this. One was called the Bound for College Guidebook, and the other was Bound for Career Guidebook. And I wrote them for young people.
I read a number of chapters, in the current book, Frank. And on the surface, I thought this was a book about our careers and associated challenges. But I found that the messages just went well beyond just our careers, and they could be applied to, other aspects of our lives. And, one of the things you were just talking about that I did want to get into was that decision-making process. You talked about me getting into traffic this morning, this, that, and the other. And it actually, ironically, I'm working from home today, so I had to navigate the dog toys and whatnot to get to my office. And I had to choose which office today. Am I going to work in my upstairs office or want to work downstairs? So, but all of that was the decision-making process. In the chapters that I read, that the one that I wanted to highlight was actually that decision-making process, because that was one of the areas where I thought, okay, this is totally applicable to our careers, but it's very much applicable in our life decisions too, that the pros and cons of things and all that. So,
I went out to the drugstore a couple of weeks ago, has raspy voice, cough, runny nose. I thought, I got to get myself something. There were 12 or 15 different products. And I'm thinking to myself, did they all do the same thing? Is one better than the other? Well, I don't know. I can't read the back of a box and get any. So I walked over to the pharmacist. I'm seeking counseling. I'm seeking guidance.
Right.
And that's the other thing we have to learn. There are people out there to help us with decisions. Our past experiences. Yogi Berra, that old baseball player from a long time ago, back in the 1900s, says, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up someplace else. And I think somewhere up here in this world up here, we have to have a goal, and we have to have a plan to reach that goal. And I sort of also, after decision making, that's when those two things kick in: goal setting and objective fulfillment. And that's how that part of the process works. You're absolutely right. If we become good decision makers, we will make them in all sorts of places other than the career development time. We're going to make them in the business decisions we make, the investment decisions we make. My wife and I are looking at alternative living arrangements, location arrangements at this point in time. I have the fortune of having a second home in Maine. I'm in Virginia with you at the moment. And we actually bought that home in 1984. It's an old home. We've done a lot of work to it. And it's sort of like a back and forth, 6 months here, 6 months there. That's the other thing. If you don't diversify, your life can get stagnant. And your career can get stagnant. And that's the last thing that somebody should want to have happen. The other thing is that we have to be prepared for the unknown. One of the challenges I have is that you're happy, you're successful, and along comes a business decision where they sell your company to somebody in Australia. And you didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right. You've been a successful, productive performer. And here you are at 55 years of age, and you're facing unemployment. My God, what am I going to do now? And that's one of the challenges I have. Be prepared for the unknown.
Yeah, a good segue, actually, because I want to ask you, being prepared for the unknown, what are some of the other big challenges that people are going to have to confront moving forward?
Well, we just lived through one. I hope we're through it at least. COVID threw us a curve, the unknown. If you live in a world like, a couple of years ago, those big tornadoes and big hurricanes that went, it can be a natural disaster. It can be the California fires. They just don't affect homes. They affect workplaces. And then there's this inevitable one is that, all of a sudden, what their company does becomes obsolete. This is what technology has done to some things. The teller, the live man or woman who I used to walk up to and smile, and she'd say, "How you doing?" I hand her my check. She'd put it in the bank. She's been replaced by a machine. That man or woman has been replaced by technology, and it's not done yet. It's clearly not done yet. Go in the grocery store this afternoon. Look at that place that says self-checkout. Self-checkout wasn't there 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
No, it's everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I just flew internationally last week, and where was that? The airport in Lisbon. You can check yourself in, bag tags, the whole 9 yards. So,
Yeah.
um, it's great in some regards when you look at it. Then in other regards, you're like, man, they're steadily replacing the worker. So,
Well, and then
you got
here's the other great challenge. And I probably I hope I don't ever get myself in trouble saying this,
Mm-hmm.
but the good news is we're living longer. The bad news is we're living longer. I am 82 years old. I have outlived my mother. My father, unfortunately, was a victim in World War II, so he died when he was in his 40s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the physical. I don't want to say I don't have the mental acuity, but I certainly don't have the physical abilities that I had at 50 or 60 or even 70. Right. And that definitely influences your ability to work. But remember what I said at the beginning, the 3 W's. We are only one of the W's. We're the worker.
Right.
The work is changing. The workplace is changing. And we have to change with it, because that's probably the biggest challenge. Change precipitates change. And, it's I hate to say it, but if we don't stay sharp, I think one of the other reasons I'm going to be going off to teach this afternoon is the mental abilities are pretty strong. I do a crossword puzzle every day of my life. Okay. Yeah. And I do that because I want to I watch shows like Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. Right. And I try to outperform the performers, So, the more you can do to help yourself, some of the things that happen to you in the latter stages are things you can't do anything about. My DNA brought me some rheumatism, and I have to walk with a cane today. But that cane does not affect my brain. And this is what we have to do. We are evolving in our human growth and development, and we are evolving in our contributions to our employers. And we need to keep that happening. But I also want to make one other thing. Very, very important. I have witnessed in my career how the workplace is different from a composition viewpoint. The people we work with are no longer, I'm a white male. The workplaces that I've been to in my last years of work have seen, the glass ceiling, discrimination in all of its forms. As I said in the middle of our podcast today, we had to create laws first, and then we had to apply those laws. And there was a reluctant society out there to let those things happen. So discrimination and inclusion became more subtle than overt. Now, everywhere I go, I'm impressed with the diversity, with the inclusion. And I think it's made for a more complementary workplace. Everybody out there, if they've been given the opportunity, given the privilege of competing, is going to contribute something. And that's an important part to consider. The workplace of today, I think, is remarkably different in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you something else is different. And I'm going to piggyback on your 3 W's of work, worker, and workplace. Another one that I think we talk a lot about, and I wanted you to address it, that, at least it wasn't in my vernacular, I would say 10 years ago, is that work-life balance. Yeah. So can you talk about those issues and how it relates to careers and all that? I'm going
to change it. The human resource departments call it work-life balance. My way is I call it life-work balance, because my life comes before my work.
Okay.
Now, maybe it was the Gen Xers, certainly the millennials. They're saying, hey, I got a life away from this place, and I want to maximize that. But also, Ralph, in addition to life work balance, we have a greater emphasis today in the overall society in mental wellness. And if your work is pulling you down, it's going to hurt you as a father, as a husband, as a partner, because if you act out at work, you're going to get fired. So you go home and you act out, or you act differently. Life work balance and counseling across the lifespan. We have a new thing today called it's not so new, 10 years old, 20 years old, called EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. We have counselors either by contract or by inside unit, depending upon the size of the employer. We have counseling offices right in factories, right in businesses. We've made the workplace friendlier. I see things like this company now has both health benefits and veterinary benefits. Your dog is covered by the benefit program. People don't mind working in an office. I have a 22-year-old grandson who just started working out of college in Atlanta, Georgia. He goes in on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday is optional. He works from his apartment on Thursday and Friday. People in the old school would have said, "What's he doing on Thursday and Friday?"
Right.
That kind of thing. But this is again one of the byproducts of COVID. It taught us remote work does work, and we've learned from that. And I think we're more flexible as a workplace today because of it. I think life-work balance is here to stay. I just hope that people will use that time to wind down, to relax, do something different. Even if they work, even if they go to a soup kitchen on an afternoon they have off, they're contributing. Pay it forward in some regard. That's good stuff.
No, absolutely. We're starting to wind down here, but when I think about our audience that listens to our podcast, obviously the vast majority are in the academy. So for those, Frank, that are in the classroom, how can you see them using the book to work with their students?
The book deals with both the here and now. If it's the student, I'm going to talk about both students and professors. From the student perspective, I think the book, if read from cover to cover, will tell the person where they are, where they've been, and whether they've moved successfully to where they are. So that's the self-help part of the book. For the educator, for the teacher, for the professor, anybody in education who's interacting with young men and women on a college campus, they have to understand the character that they're trying to help. And I think my book explains the things they should be looking for: aptitudes, interests, lifestyle preferences, values, all those kinds of things. If a 40-year-old professor has been through the process, sometimes they forget what they went through back in their 20s and their early 30s. And my book will bring them back to a reality of what that is like today. And guess what? Those Gen Xers and Gen Yers and millennials, they're different. They're very different. I was born pre-baby boom. My son was born the last year of the baby boomers. This new crop of people, and they dominate the workplace. It's not unusual today, Ralph, for people to work for somebody younger than they are. That just didn't happen in the old days. Seniority was premier. If you were the oldest person in the place, you were probably the manager or the supervisor. That's not true anymore. So that's another way in which the workplace is different. I don't want people to find culture shock or management shock when they go out to work. I think part of the process, the latter 2 years of whatever you study. There was a guy who was a secretary of, back when we had health, education, and welfare, before education was broken off and health became a man by the name of John Gardner. And John Gardner says, we can't put college professors in high esteem and plumbers in low esteem. we have to respect the dignity of all work,
Mhm.
or neither our pipes nor our theories will hold water. And that thing has stuck with me for so many, many years.
It's very
I
profound.
yeah, I mean, I want my plumber to be as smart as my brain surgeon.
Right.
Exactly.
No.
And when that happens, I'm not sure it's going to happen in my lifetime, but we're getting closer. I mentioned the name Ken Hoyt and Ed Herr a little while back. They were both very, very strong in what was called the career education movement. The career education movement was started in the 1970s by a Sidney Marlin, who was the commissioner of education. And he says, this is it's sort of like my 8 stages. There's something called career readiness,
Mm-hmm.
and there's something called college readiness, and there's something called certificate license readiness. And we need to teach that process so that people understand where they are, where they've been, and where they have the possibility of going.
Right. Frank, I mean, again, I think the book is just a great blueprint, starting out as a young person, mid-career, et cetera. But one of the things that was hitting me and thinking about it was that person, basically everywhere in the book where you say go right, they went left, and now they have that realization that, hey, I'm in this place where I'm stuck, let's just say I'm 40 years old. And maybe some of the technology has passed me. This has passed me. Maybe I don't have the education that I need or some of the background that I need. What do you recommend for those people who realize they're in that wrong spot? How do they move forward?
The sad part about it is it's not without pain. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you've spent a lot of money getting an education and you don't like where you are, that's not only lost time, that's lost money. I like to tell people this: watch for places to bridge. How can you get from here to here without going back here? If you can do that, look for it. I've counseled people in my career as a consultant, and I've counseled employee assistance programs. Decision making or late decision making, mid-career decision making can sometimes be painful. But if we don't do it, we're still sentencing ourselves to more dissatisfaction, to less success. And yet some people bite the bullet and do that. They're the ones who can't wait for the rocking chair on the back porch or the Wednesday morning golf thing. They just says, give me the shortest distance between now and exit, and I'm out of here. And there are others who say, you know what, I'm going to live longer. Mm-hmm. I'm still pretty sharp. Can I go back to an adult education program? Let me give you an example. When I'm at my second home in Maine, I teach a course in the adult education classes or courses called Writing Successful Grant Proposals. These are all people, they work in churches, they work in nonprofits, they work nobody ever taught them how to write a grant proposal. Well, I've written some grant proposals and been successful getting them funded. So I feel like I'm paying it forward by teaching this adult education class. But the people in there are 40, they're 50. I've had an 80-year-old in there. Okay. I have a man who's an exterminator in life who wrote a grant to buy a building to keep for historical preservation. It may be hard for you to do, but if it's something you truly want, will measure and bring you to those 2 words, success and satisfaction, you should try to go for it. And I've got I've got some schemes, in there about how that's done. But I'm also going to tell you, when you do the wrong thing and you feel stuck, it's going to hit you in the pocketbook. It's going to hit you in the calendar. And you know what? It's going to hit you in your ego. You're going to say, damn, I shouldn't have done that. And maybe that's the worst damage, is the damage to your ego. There are a lot of people who won't want to admit they made a mistake. And my 3 words to that are get over it. We all make mistakes.
Yeah. All right, get over it. Simplicity. Hey, Frank, we close here. For those who want to get the book, can you tell them how they can get it?
The publisher of my book, I'm going to hold it up here for a second. The publisher is Rowman and Littlefield.
Okay.
You can go to their website. Rowman is ROWMAN and Littlefield. You can also get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Noble. You can either put in Career Challenges and Frank Burtnett, or you can put in Frank Burtnett. But when you put in Frank Burtnett, you'll get my other books too. But right. Career Challenges, Frank Burtnett, on most of the wholesalers will find the book for you. And if you can't find the book, I have a very simple email address: ednow, EDNOW. That was short for my consulting firm, was called Education Now. ednow@AOL.com. Shoot me a note, and I'll figure out how to get you connected to my book.
See, that just lets me know you're still behind the technology curve because you have an AOL address.
I know. Well, the people at AOL are not going to like that. But if I canceled AOL and became Frank Burtnett at Gmail, I will have been lost to hundreds, if not thousands, of people.
No, I kid you in saying that, but yeah, I know some people too that still have their AOL extensions, and they say the same thing.
Yeah.
So I get it. It's like my cell phone number. I would never change it, no matter where I live. That type of thing. But hey, Frank, I want to thank you for your time. Our audience thanks you, Diverse thanks you, and we appreciate the work that you've been doing. But one last thing I got to ask you, totally unrelated. As I mentioned before, Frank and I used to always talk football, so Frank's a big football guy. So Frank, several times, I guess it's this season and last season, NFL, looking at Micah Parsons.
Yes.
Cowboy, Penn State guy. So Frank's a Penn State guy. So, Penn State has always been known as linebacker U. So where does Micah rank for you there?
Well, the interesting thing is my oldest grandson went to the University of Georgia. Mm-hmm. My youngest grandson is at the University of Georgia now. My granddaughter is at UVA in Virginia, University of Virginia, and they all give me grief. For some reason, I grew up in Pennsylvania. Believe it or not, I'm not a Penn State grad. I grew up in Pennsylvania. My loyalties to Penn State. I studied at a university called Shippensburg University. At that time, it was a teacher's college. I will always be a Penn State fan. I go back to all the old timers. James Franklin, I think, is a good recruiter. I think the jury's still out with respect to, he's got to get tougher and tougher with Michigan and Ohio State, and then maybe we'll see my youngest grandson says, if Georgia ever plays Penn State, I'm going to buy you tickets. I said, if Penn State ever plays Georgia, I'm going to buy the tickets, and I'm going to take everybody in the family. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. But Georgia, just as a segue for us here, you remember the Arthur Ashe Awards that we do at Diverse. Actually, we just put out the call for nominations yesterday, but our Arthur Ashe male winner of the year last year was Nakobe Dean. It's the middle linebacker from Georgia, who's now with the Eagles, I guess. So he'll be playing this weekend. So
yes,
we go complete circle on that. So, okay. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Ralph.